The protagonist wonders how long he has been in this abyss, and the worst part is that he is waiting to die. Currently, he remembers only fragments of the past. People openly told him that they hated him and wished Norman would die. He also remembers the desperate cries of his loved ones. At this time, his soul was broken into small pieces, and it seems that he was trapped in a permanent curse. Norman kept hearing calls for him to get out and just die. He believed that death was the only way out, but he did not want to die. This curse continued until the girl's beautiful voice brought him to his senses. And it was then that Norman swore that he would devote his entire life to protecting the man who saved him. The designated imperial city celebrated the 500th anniversary of the founding of the empire. Finally, after 10 hard years, that time had come, and the girl confidently walked forward across the square. Lowton's people looked at her in surprise. The girl who was the object of everyone's amazement was Alicia Melfont. She rejoiced at her magical return and noted that her house was still there. These were surprisingly fertile lands due to the favorable climate. There was an estate in its prime, where the soul rejoices. The estate was home to a prominent family, where famous knights were born for many generations. The heroine recalls her family, namely her parents, who were well-known aristocrats in the West, and her brother and his most pleasant wife. The little girl simply adored her family, who had always been nothing but joy for her. The heroine also recalls how one morning her father brought a new family member to their house. He said that from now on she would live with them. She was a sweet girl with golden hair named Ophelia, who had divine powers. The girls became friends right away, and the main character was very happy to have a sister and a friend. Ophelia often complimented Alicia on how beautiful she was, especially with this wreath of Teresia flowers. Alicia was so happy about everything. Life seemed so beautiful to her in those moments. She was sure that the goddess Maya was smiling at them. The whole family was so happy, and it seemed like it would last forever. But one day, black clouds did hang over the estate. It all started when a guy named Nyx came to visit them. Alicia immediately noticed something strange and repulsive about him. However, Ophelia, on the contrary, was very kind to him. She brought him to the house, despite the protests of the heroine. And it was her only mistake, but such a significant one. Nyx always followed her wherever she went. Alicia, recalling those moments, reproaches herself for not being able to discern his true intentions in time. It turns out that it was not Ophelia herself that he needed, but her divine gift. In fact, the young wandering Nyx was a vicious priest who worshipped the god Arpho, who was known for his dark power. Nyx wanted to take possession of Ophelia's divine power, which could help bring the god Arpho out of his sleep. But instead, he made the dark forces of the god Arpho descend upon the estate. Thousands of people fell victim to the ritual. The heroine's family was not spared. The family was screaming for Alicia to be saved. In an instant, Alicia lost everything that was important to her and that she loved so much. When the heroine finally regained consciousness, she was almost alone in a large, empty mansion. Only her little nephew Alfred was with her. Later, she saw her father's memorial ring on the floor. Left with just her baby, she promised herself she would do whatever it took to survive. On that day, she also vowed that she would certainly restore the Melfin estate and her family's name. Her nephew Alfred will receive her father's ring as the sole heir to the family. Ophelia simply ran away during those terrible events, leaving her foster sister to die. But Alicia notes that it was thanks to her anger and hatred for Ophelia that she was able to become who she is today. In order to get back on her feet, the heroine lost her pride and became a wine seller. It was only through her dedicated work that she was able to restore the Melfin estate in just 10 years. People around her noted the size of the jewelry on it and guessed its value. Envious people whispered behind her back and secretly called her a witch. They made fun of her because she called herself an aristocrat, but in fact she got her wealth from selling wine. Alicia, on the other hand, invited men to Romdak in her free time. She promised to show them the jewelry, although it was made only for members of the imperial family. But then she added with a sly look that she doubted they would have enough money to buy them. She went on to add that these evil people are only capable of spreading gossip behind their backs. Alicia thought that the privileges of the aristocracy meant nothing to her now. She just goes her own way and paves the way for her nephew Alfred until he grows up. At that moment, everyone around us opened their mouths in surprise, looking at the fireworks. Alicia thought fireworks were a waste of money. She was concerned about where their taxes went. Suddenly, everything around us shook, and there was an explosion. Alicia couldn't understand what had happened. She realized that there was no time to waste, and that she had to get out of there. For a moment, she thought she understood what had happened and was overcome with strange feelings. But no, she refused to believe it. She was greeted by a rather familiar young man who addressed her by her full name and ironically said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Of course it was Nix. He called Alicia a stubborn girl because she managed to survive that day. Alicia responded by screaming hysterically for him to be cursed, but she was able to control her emotions. The girl told Nix that he was also lucky because she had heard that the priests had also mocked him on that terrible day when he killed her parents. They continued to have a dialogue. Alicia expressed hope that she had long thought that his corpse had been rotting somewhere for a long time, and he noted her unchanging sharp tongue. Finally, Nix asked the heroine where it was and where she had hidden it. The girl did not understand who it was about. He explained that he was interested in Ophelia and asked if she was here. Alicia just hated him at that moment. Another unpleasant blow to her was the mention of Ophelia. She decided that she needed to somehow detain him here until the priests arrived. The girl treated him like a miserable animal and asked if he really didn't know anything. Suddenly, an idea came to her, and she said that Ophelia had died that day. Nix looked very puzzled, and Alicia was overjoyed that her plan had worked. But the guy instantly changed his face and slyly stated that it was a lie. Alicia looked furious and refused to believe what was happening. Nix activated his dark power and acted on the poor girl. Her life was in danger, and before she lost consciousness, she managed to mentally note that she was risking herself again because of Ophelia. When Alicia was able to open her eyes, everything was blurry, and she couldn't understand where she was. I just heard a voice next to me, telling someone to keep an eye on her and wait for a command from Mr. Nix. Lying on the floor in shackles, she wondered with horror what was waiting for her next. The girl began to force herself to get up, because she could not just die here. She remembered that she was responsible for baby Alfred and could not leave her wine business. After a while, the heroine managed to get out of the bars and ended up on the lake. She didn't understand what was happening and thought it was all a dream. Then Alicia saw a wonderful book floating in the middle of the lake. This surprised her even more. The heroine picked up the book and mentally analyzed what else could happen here. The book's wrapper bore its strange title, Ophelia's Night. The heroine was overwhelmed by memories and decided that there could not be a funny story described there, judging by the title of the book. But when Alicia opened it, she realized that it was about her life. It described in detail the events that took place on that terrible night. It was about how Nix put a curse on the Melfon estate. It also said that when all this happened, Ophelia immediately rushed to baby Alfred's side to help. Then, according to the book, she went to her sister Alicia. But when she approached her, the girl's life force had already left her and gone to the dark god. Alicia was surprised by what she read, but she did begin to remember something. She remembered how the demon's hand grabbed her, and she died for a while. At that time, Ophelia activated all her divine powers to bring her sister back to life. With the remnants of such powers, she sealed the young man Nix, who was overthrown. It would seem that after Ophelia was able to defeat the messenger of the dark god, peace and tranquility would come. 10 years later, however, Nix's people found a way to free him. The servant of the god Arpho woke up after a long sleep and first of all decided to find Ophelia. Reading the book further, Alicia was surprised to learn that Nix came to the capital because he felt Ophelia's divine power in her. Now she understood why he was asking about her so much. She decided that she could use Ophelia's power to strike Nix. She didn't understand how she could do it, but decided that as she read on, she would find a clue in the book. But then she realized that she had overlooked one important detail. The fact was that, judging by the title of the book, the main character was Ophelia, not Alicia. Nix executed the imperial army and built the citadel of Tintaros in the far corner of the kingdom. He was hiding there and trying to trap Ophelia by sending her pieces of Alicia's body. Finally, Ophelia came to him. She begged him to stop and leave her sister alone, but the crazy guy slit Alicia's throat right in front of Ophelia, thanking her beforehand that it was thanks to Alicia that he was able to lure the victim here. Reading about these events in the book, Alicia was horrified to think that she was going to die. The heroine hysterically shouted that she did not agree with this development. She had no intention of dying because she had the divine power of Ophelia. With its help, she will be able to heal any wound. According to the book, the light power immediately returned to its owner after Alicia's head fell to the floor. Ophelia became even stronger at that moment, having the power not only of the spirit but also of the mind. Having gained even more power, this time Ophelia sealed Nix forever, thus preventing the return of the dark god Arpho. This is how the story of Ophelia, the girl who saved humanity, ended. Alicia cried because she realized from the book that it was she who had to die so that Ophelia could survive. But she immediately pulled herself together and decided to fight, because she did not agree with this ending. As she continued to read, she reassured herself that it was just a bad dream and she had to wake up. Alicia tried to recover as soon as possible because her little nephew Alfred was waiting for her. Melfin's people also needed it, but she was still in chains and did not understand why this dream did not end. While behind bars herself, Alicia heard the cries of people begging for help. They were prisoners to be sacrificed to the dark god Arfo. She also heard Nyx persuading people and saying that they would be sacrificed for a good cause. And then she realized that it was Tantares, the place where Nyx met and hid. Being in chains, Alicia thought everything that was happening was quite strange because everything was going exactly as described in the book. And then she realized with horror that it was here that she might die in the story. The heroine forbade herself to give up and ordered to look for a way out. Alicia remembered that if she believed what was described in the book, she now had Ophelia's divine power. All that was left was to figure out how to use it. This will allow the girl to escape. She hoped that this power would even help her hurt Nyx, so that he would pay for what he had done to the Melfont family. Suddenly, she heard a voice asking if it was that girl's camera. Time was short, so she tried to think of how Ophelia used her powers. The girl cursed because nothing had occurred to her, and they could have grabbed her at any second. The next minute she concentrated and mentally asked Ophelia to help her. Nyx's men were surprised by the sound they heard. They thought with hope that it was the god Arfo, who had heard their master's prayers and calls. They decided that they needed to get Alicia to Nyx as soon as possible so that he wouldn't be nervous. When they entered the dungeon, they saw the girl sitting there, having freed her hands by herself. The servants looked surprised and excited. With a sly smile, Alicia told them that she would arrange a real hell for them on Earth. The heroine began to do incredible things. Finally, she realized that all this time Ophelia's divine power had really been in her. Feeling an incredible surge of strength, she decided to herself that she would fight to the end and would not accept the ending described in the book. In the confusion of her own making, the girl did not immediately notice how she flew several floors and landed at the bottom. She gathered all her strength again and decided that the most important thing now was to get out of here. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she forced herself to find a way out as quickly as possible because little Alfred was waiting for her. Then Nyx's men saw her and decided that they had to catch up with the girl quickly. One servant managed to grab hold of her and tear off a piece of her dress. Alicia fell to the floor and started screaming in despair. She cursed at her dress and shouted that it almost got her caught. Then she was surprised to see a crowd of angry Nyx's minions rushing at her, but they could do nothing to her. Finally, she realized that her power had created a kind of barrier and protection for Alicia from her attackers. This fact made her very happy, and she thought about what to do next. She decided for herself that the only thing they would be able to get from her was this piece of cloth that they had managed to tear off her clothes. The attackers could only stand there and continue to call the girl names and threaten her. Alicia was once again under the protection of Ophelia's divine power, and she knew it well. But the heroine was not going to thank her half-sister for it. Then she decided to seize the moment and address the men as fools to ask them a question. She asked why they were so desperate to become servants of the god Arfo, since he would obviously not share his dark power with them. Already after she left, they started shouting and threatening her to watch her language, and that the dark god would punish her for it. Having managed to escape from them, Alicia was surprised at herself. How did she manage to use the power without any knowledge? But then she realized that she could only escape from here if she remembered what happened in the book, no matter how much she didn't want to. She mentioned that there must be a source at the end of this tunnel, and that was the information in that novel. In that place, there's a prison where a knight named Norman Diaz is imprisoned, who is able to destroy the entire universe with his power. According to the book, Ophelia began to use the divine power that had returned to her after Alicia's death, and it was with her help that she wanted to free the knight from his water trap. Alicia decided to get ahead of her and use Norman to escape, but in the meantime, she was alarmed by the fact that she did not see a spring nearby that could hold a whole man. Here she felt that she had stepped into something wet and wondered what it could be. Right in front of her, she saw the same spring where the knight was, but in fact, it looked more like a puddle than a spring. She reassured herself that she needed to check him out better first. Alicia began to go further into it, but it was still not as deep as it should be for an adult to fit in. She stubbornly walked further and further, and suddenly began to fall rapidly down in the water. The heroine realized that it was actually a trap and blamed herself. She flew down until she saw the knight, Norman Diaz. The young man impressed her so much with his appearance that she thought the pervert Nyx had imprisoned him here because of his beauty. Alicia kept her eyes on him and noted that it was the first time she had ever seen such a handsome guy. He seemed so young to her that she thought time had simply frozen for him here. Alicia became so interested in the stranger that she instantly forgot why she was looking for him in the first place. At that moment, she was guided only by her instincts. But she was able to stabilize her feelings and decided with a cool head that he still needed to be fired first. After swimming the distance with him, she fell down tiredly. The thought occurred to her that she needed to improve her physical condition because she was too weak to save anyone at all. The heroine accused the young man of being too heavy and even wanted to throw him there. Norman Diaz continued to lie there and did not even open his eyes. Alicia was already tense. She began to worry if he had died. Finally, she heard his breathing and realized that the young man was alive. In her mind, she compared him to a sleeping beauty, or rather a prince. Then the girl started shaking him and addressing him as Mr. Norman. She told him her name was Alicia Melfant and began to persuade him to open his eyes, because she needed his help so badly. But without seeing any reaction from him, she began to hysterically wake him up. The girl said they had to run away quickly before the lover of darkness found them. Suddenly, Alicia was forced to turn her head to the side and look at a voice. Was it the crazy Nix who asked where she was hiding Ophelia? The confused girl asked what he meant. As he got closer to her, she reminded him that Ophelia had died. Then Nix leaned over to Alicia and said that she was lying, because he could feel her sister's strength. He even touched the girl to reassure her that the divine power was indeed near. The heroine guessed that he could really feel Ophelia's power when she activated it and used it to escape. But then something else caught Nix's attention, and he looked surprised. He saw Norman Diaz lying on the floor and asked Alicia how she managed to free him. He couldn't believe that it was Alicia who did it. Nix was sure it was Ophelia. She came here to free Norman. Finally, without hesitation, Alicia did what she had long dreamed of. She hit Nix hard. In doing so, she showed that she had the divine power he needed and sought. Frantic with anger, Alicia confessed to Nix that Ophelia had used the remnants of her powers to seal him and then resurrected her. She also added that she now keeps her strength within herself. Nix was distorted with despair, and he refused to believe what he was hearing. The heroine carefully watched the emotions of the servant of the dark god. She happily said that now he felt what she had felt for so long. Nix, who was beside himself with anger, began to call the girl insulting names and said that Ophelia's divine power could not be used by people like her. Alicia looked like a victor and teased him that he would not be able to kill her now. Nix's eyes were full of pity and despair. He realized that by killing Alicia, he would also damage the power he needed so badly. He refused to believe it. The guy shouted that Ophelia was chosen by God, so she couldn't just die. Finally, he managed to grab the heroine's leg. Nix called the girl a liar and decided that she had deceived him. Alicia shouted that she had hit him only with divine power, so he should believe her. Then she heard a voice ordering Nix to kill the girl, and then Ophelia would return. The guy asked the heroine if she had heard these words. He said it was the voice of his god, Arpho. Nix stated that he only needed to kill the girl, and then everything would fall into place. With crazy eyes, he shouted that she had no idea why he needed this power. Without letting go of the girl's throat, the dark servant said that the precious energy had already begun to flow out of her, so she was not worthy of it. He wanted Alicia Melfant to die in agony and was very happy about it. The girl resisted as best she could. She did not believe that she could just die here. Suddenly, she heard strange sounds and saw Nix being twisted by some unknown force. Alicia finally felt free and did not understand what had happened. Norman Diaz stood next to her and said that she was safe now. The heroine saw the holy barrier, whose power has now saved her. Now she understood why Nix had taken off so abruptly. But she still had the crazy and scary face of her attacker in front of her eyes. And in her head, she heard his voice calling her to him and threatening that she would never be able to escape from him. Then Alicia abruptly pulled away and rudely sent Nix away. And Nix was sitting there, chained by some kind of energy, shouting that he was giving the girl a chance to sacrifice herself to a dark god. The heroine concluded that the attacker had been hunting for her body all along. Norman, who was watching, asked the stranger who the man was and whether he wanted to harm her. Alice replied that it was a fallen priest who had killed all the members of the Melfant family and sacrificed them to the dark god Arpho. She urged that he should not be allowed to live. He asked if she was a daughter of the Melfant family. The heroine sadly replied that she used to be, but added that now she is the head of her new family. At that moment, they saw Nix standing up and shouting to Alicia. The young people defended themselves against Nix, who almost broke the protective barrier. Alicia turned to Norman and stammered and asked him to protect her. Norman replied that he was sorry, but he didn't have the strength to resist the dark minion right now. but he added hopefully that he could buy some time for them. Then they heard Nyx's voice urging Norman to surrender, because soon their barrier would fall. He also shouted that he would tear the night apart and sacrifice his blood to a dark god. The dark servant was coming closer and closer to them. Alicia was in despair and mentally decided that this was the end of them. Norman rushed toward Nyx. The heroine stood still and recalled the events described in the book. According to the plot of the novel, Norman Diaz was a holy knight and had a power that could upset the balance in the universe. This young man predicted her death in a book and reminds her of the inevitable danger in the future. But he is also her only savior, Alicia thought. Norman warned the girl that they had to get out of here as soon as possible. Alicia couldn't help but look at Nyx's monster. He lay chained to the ground, but still threatened Alicia with his eyes. In her head, she heard that she would still suffer. The voice in her head also said that death would find her, and this led the girl to a state of shock. Then she stubbornly shouted that it was all a lie and manipulation, and she would not sit idly by and wait for danger. In her head, she kept hearing that she was just a vessel for Ophelia's divine power. Norman realized that the girl was being tormented by voices inside her and begged her to resist it, because in this way, he wanted to influence her and make her more vulnerable. He reassured Alicia and told her that he believed in her, because for him she was already a hero who had saved him. The guy apologized and reiterated that they had to leave. Then he took her in his arms and swore that he would save her. Nyx remained on the floor, but he kept trying to send voices into Alicia's head. The young people were leaving that place, but a voice warned them that the dark god Arpho would still lead them to hell. Ophelia opened her eyes and started screaming. She was approached by a man who addressed her by name. A young man named Nicholas Diaz, who was the second son of the Diaz family, asked the girl how she was feeling. Ophelia recognized the young man and asked him how long she had been missing and how many days had passed since the festival. Nicholas replied that less than a day had passed and assured the girl not to worry, because Nyx hadn't been able to get what he wanted. He added that they still had time before he killed Alicia. Ophelia blamed herself for being unconscious at a time when everyone needed her so much. Nicholas offered to find a place to hide Nyx while Ophelia rested. But the girl replied that there was no time for that and that she had to go. Then the guy objected that they still didn't even know where he could sit. Ophelia confidently answered that the place was Tantaros. Nicholas asked the other knight if they had ever heard of the name Tantaros. He replied that he had never heard such a thing before. The girl said she couldn't explain, because this name and the location of the citadel suddenly came to her mind. Nicholas listened attentively, knowing that Ophelia had a strong premonition and was never wrong. He hoped that he would find clues to Norman's whereabouts there. He also hoped that he was waiting for him. So he decided to go and ordered Jack to prepare for the journey. Meanwhile, Alicia was flying somewhere with Norman. She didn't understand whether it was a dream or real. The young man asked the girl to close her eyes for 1 minute. Alicia thought it would be difficult for her to do so with him so close. Finally, they landed on the ground. Norman asked the beauty if she was injured. She replied that she thought she was fine. But then Alicia was overwhelmed by memories of how she had recently been in danger. She realized that she had been so focused on saving her life that she had completely forgotten how he had attacked her with his demonic power. She realized that this monster had ruined everything. Norman tried to stabilize Alicia's condition and bring her back to the present. She couldn't get the fragments of that night out of her mind and screamed that she was in pain and had trouble breathing. At that moment, she remembered how Nyx had ruthlessly strangled her. The young man just started shouting hysterically for her to come to her senses. He realized that she was gasping for breath from the shock and horror of her experience. The knight held her and promised that he would not let her die here. Norman decided to loosen the lacing on her dress to make it easier for her to breathe. Before that, he apologized for his possibly questionable actions. Finally, Alicia opened her eyes and looked confidently in front of her. The young man asked if she was feeling better. She asked if she was still alive. Norman nodded affirmatively and added that he was alive for as long as he could be. Alicia did not look happy, but rather confused. She realized that everything had gone wrong according to the book's plot. Nyx couldn't kill her. Having already recovered from the shock, the girl threw herself into Norman's arms and was glad to get out of there alive. He replied that she was safe now and everything would be fine. Alicia recalled the threats that she would not be able to escape death forever, so she wondered if she could rewrite the tragic ending. Norman offered her to lean on his manly shoulder. He suggested that all she needed now was sleep. Meanwhile, Nicholas and Ophelia got to the citadel. They wondered why everything around them was in ruins. Jack turned to the captain and told him that they had found the heretical priest and that he was lying crushed under the slabs. Ophelia asked for a priest to be brought to seal him urgently. Nicholas ordered the knight to show him the way. Ophelia hoped that when Nyx was sealed, they would find out all the information. She also mentally noted that something had changed, but she did not understand what. Alicia and Norman were having a rest. The young man noted that the world had not changed at all. He regrettably admitted that he would now have to be the head of the family, as he was the only one left alive. The young man kept wondering how much had happened while he was sleeping. A picture of his little brother screaming arose in his mind, and he thought that they must have all suffered greatly. He blamed himself for everything. Memories overwhelmed him. He recalled the first time he gave his full name, Norman Diaz, to Zoya, a friend. His interlocutor was surprised by the way his name sounded. Zoe was a prefix to a name given by God himself and used only in the family. A long time ago, Norman revealed his name to his friend Iago because he actually already considered him a brother. They have been through a lot together. He also confessed to Iago that he was like a member of his family. But despite the fact that they had been together in every difficult battle, there came a time when Norman asked him a direct question to his face because he did not expect such meanness from him. Iago instantly went mad and began to call for death to come for his enemy Norman Diaz Zoe. Norman realized too late how blind he had been, that he did not see his friend's true intentions and hatred for him. The boy recalled that he himself had once told a secret to Iago, and he had imposed an ancient curse, but it also required the victim's real name. Norman begged him not to do this and to let the boy go. He warned that any spell only makes things worse for the caster. Iago looked completely crazy. He said he hated Norman from the very first time they met. He added that life would be beautiful without Norman. Iago wished his former comrade would die and called for him to surrender for a start. Then he pushed the guy even harder, and the guy was screaming to be let go. Then a young man named Nicholas activated his divine power and saved Norman, who was almost turned to ashes. Norman was under the curse for some time. He heard Iago screaming about how he hated him and wanted him dead. He recalled how he had been friends and trusted Iago for many years, and all this time he had just dreamed of him dying. He could also hear Nicholas's screams in his head, begging him not to let go and not to leave him here. Under the curse, Norman was just waiting for the end, but he didn't really want to die, until he heard the voice of a beautiful stranger whispering to him to hold on and not die. Returning to the present, Norman looked at the sleeping Alicia. He heard some incomprehensible sounds, like a moan from her. The young man tensed up a bit. Then he decided to touch her forehead to check it. He thought Alicia was too hot. Norman decided that he had to act. He realized that his power might not be very effective, but he had no other choice. He tried to activate his divine power. The guy realized that the girl was very weak and not feeling well. He guessed that Alicia had pulled him out of the lake with such injuries on his body, and he was not that light. Norman wondered how the girl was so afraid of death that she was able to travel such a long and difficult path. It also occurred to the knight that Alicia was not motivated by fear, but rather by a desire to live. He was curious to know what kind of person she was, and decided that he could find out more about the girl when she woke up. Norman couldn't remember the last time he'd been so worried. Everything that has happened now became possible only because Alicia became a victim. She made sure her hands were still in place. It even surprised her. Looking at her hands again, she realized that she was not dead. She said in a joyful voice that she was alive. Alicia cursed that book and the story described in it. She saw something that alarmed and surprised her at the same time. She saw the bed and realized it out loud. She remembered only the escape from Tantaros, and all other memories were very vague. Alicia became nervous and started shouting that she could not remember anything at all. She wondered where she was and what kind of place it was. Finally, a young man appeared at the door and happily announced that he had returned. The guy saw a strange picture before his eyes and heard a question. "Who is he?" The young man dropped the fruit basket from his hands in surprise. Alicia attacked the other man and demanded to know who he was. She believed that he was Nyx's minion and threatened that he would not succeed in deceiving her. The man shouted that he was just an old man. Shocked, Norman began to calm the girl down and said that they were just kind people who had taken them in. Alicia did not trust Norman. She believed that strangers could not do this just like that. The old man made excuses and said that he saw the untidy clothes they were wearing, so he realized they had no money. The girl said she didn't understand what he meant. In fact, she was wearing only one ball gown, dressed in her grandmother's nightgown, and completely barefoot. She also wore a wedding ring that could not be sold. While Alicia missed her silk dress and jewelry, Norman apologized to his old owners for his companion's actions. Norman thanked her for her understanding and explained that she had been through a lot. The owners got into the position and told the boy that he was very kind. Left alone, Norman told Alicia that he guessed she didn't understand anything right now. He explained that he thought he would have time to return before the girl woke up and then tell her everything. He expressed his joy at seeing the girl, who had already fully recovered and regained her strength. They noticed that the wounds on her arms had disappeared. Alicia asked how it happened that she recovered so quickly. Norman did not know what to say when he heard the question about his divine power. Instead of answering, the young man offered the girl a snack. He said that he brought apples from the forest across the street because they have no money, so they will eat like this for now. He held out an apple and assured me that it was not poisonous. Alicia mistook the fruit for addressing Mr. Norman. Did the heroine dare to ask who changed her clothes when she was unconscious? Norman was not confused and replied that it was an old lady, the owner of the house. He added that her clothes were wet and dirty. The girl was nervous, but agreed with this answer. Alicia continued to ask questions. She wanted to know where they were and how long had passed since their escape. She also mentioned Nyx. Norman was surprised to hear his name and asked him again. Alicia reminded him that this was the nasty priest Norman had fought. She demanded some information about him. Norman admitted that Nyx received a strong blow filled with divine power. He added that he is likely to be paralyzed for some time, several weeks or even more. Norman expressed his sadness that he could not end it then. The fact is that while he was under the curse, he lost a lot of strength. Alicia noticed that the young man was telling everything with a smile on his face, and this alarmed her. Norman told the girl that she had slept for 2 days after escaping from the citadel. The girl was surprised because she thought she was awake and had fainted. The young man said that he carried her in this state through the forest until they reached a village. This place is called Thule. Alicia mentioned that the village of Thule is located on the border of the Empire and the East Coast. Being well versed in the area, the girl guessed that this place was not so far from the Romdak Guild headquarters, so they could easily return to the Empire. Norman turned to the girl and asked her permission to ask him a question. Alicia agreed. The guy asked how the heroine knew that he was in that lake. Alicia looked worried and was silent for a while. Norman admitted that he was concerned about several things. He did not understand why the girl saved him and still does not know her name. Did the heroine hesitate to tell him what she had read about him in the book? Alicia began to imagine that she had heard that the first son of the Diaz family had simply disappeared a long time ago. She went on to tell me that she found him in this lake in Tantaros. Her intuition seemed to tell her that he was the first son of the Diaz family. Norman did not give up and continued his interrogation. He wondered why Nyx had sealed him up and kidnapped the girl. Alicia replied that Nyx was trying to become the heir to the dark god Arfo and was doing everything he could to do so. It is known that thousands of years ago, Arfo gave the universe the 7 deadly sins. People started killing each other with the help of dark forces. Mayera, the goddess of life, could not bear to see her children die, in whom she had invested divine power, so she struck the demon and sealed him. Also, the goddess Mera hid the dark curses of the harp on the pages of the secret folio so that her children would forget this horror forever. People placed this folio in the far corner of the temple to bury it there for a long time. But Nyx, who had strong divine powers, was able to quickly find this secret tome. He shouted for the servants to let out their hatred and called for cursing all enemies. People listened to him say that this is the only way to achieve true liberation. For the priest Nyx, the magic of the harp's curse and the power it gives was a very strong temptation. After he defeated Norman, he imprisoned him in his lair. It was like his trophy, which he won for the first time as a servant of the god Arfo. Alicia knew the whole story and considered herself a fairly honest person, but she admitted that she could not say to the young man's face that he was a living trophy of a demon. Instead, she said that Nyx had used divine power to seal Norman and his curse and then went to the Melfin estate. She added that he had been a priest of Mayera until then. The girl knew all this thanks to the book. Nyx gained dark powers after sacrificing the people of the Melfin estate. The heroine continued the story and said that in the end, Ophelia struck Nyx, but his heirs resurrected him. The girl said that after he came back to life, he immediately found Alicia and kidnapped her. Norman was shocked by what he heard and expressed his regret for the girl's loss. Alicia replied that it was all in the past and asked if her story had helped him. The young man thanked him and said that a lot had happened over the past 10 years. He said that the owner of the house told him that the Lotan Empire was founded 500 years ago and that this year they would celebrate this date. Norman remembered his brother Nicholas and suggested that he must have grown up by now. The young man felt guilty that the boy must have been worried about him all these years. He clarified that Nicholas is his dear younger brother. Alicia asked if it was about Nicholas Diaz and reported that she had seen him several times at parties. Norman was very excited and started asking the girl about him. The girl replied with satisfaction that he was doing well. Mentally, she understood the reason for this, because he was courting Ophelia. She said Norman would be surprised to see how much his brother has grown. But she didn't want to tell him that he had actually become an arrogant fool. The young man beamed with happiness and said he couldn't wait to meet him. Alicia replied that she was very happy for him. Norman then asked the girl her name, because she had not told him. The heroine waited for the right moment and introduced herself in full. She said that her name was Alicia, and she was the head of the Melfont family and the Romdak Trade Guild. Voices were heard in the Melfont estate. The maid delivered the letter to the lady. The lady's name was Erica, and she was Alicia's secretary. The message was sent on behalf of the paladins. The letter informed the lords of the realm of the latest developments related to the unrest in Loten. It was also said that during an expedition to the western borders of the kingdom, Tantares, which was Nyx's hiding place, was found. The sender reported that inside there were traces of the heretic killing people and sacrificing them to the dark god Arfo. It was reported that when they arrived at the place, Tantares was already in ruins, and Nyx, who was unconscious, was picked up by the temple ministers to be resealed. Unfortunately, the whereabouts of the young woman who was abducted at the festival are still unknown. The letter said that some of Nyx's heirs had managed to escape, so they advised avoiding any communication with the heirs of certain religious organizations if possible. After reading the letter, Erica said that it was signed by Nicholas Diaz, a representative of the paladins. The maid was frightened and asked what they were supposed to do now. Erica assumed that Lady Alicia had not been to Tanatus, so she was either killed and her body was hidden before the paladins arrived. The female secretary expressed hope that the lady might have escaped. Alicia looked at the plate of food. Finally, she began to eat. Norman offered the girl a warm drink. The heroine was amazed, because she knew very little about him from the novel and had no idea what he was really like. She recalled how a young man urged her to resist and supported her, saying she would make it. He called the girl a hero who saved him, so she has the strength to survive all this. Alicia thought Norman was extremely cute. Over lunch, she began to analyze what had happened. She recalled that she was kidnapped on the first day of the festival and thrown into the Tantaros dungeon. She was unconscious for the next 2 days. So it turned out that the heroine left the Melfont estate 3 days ago. Alicia reflected that she used that time to change the ending of the book, but she is still unsure whether she can stop her death. Mentally, the heroine reproached herself for putting her little nephew's life at risk for such a long time. She guessed that her cousin Gale would try to become Alfred's guardian, as he had long been eyeing the Melfont family's fortune. Alicia was also worried about her foolish fiancé, Philip Morfolk, who could steal the family's money and run off with his mistress. The girl was worried about Alfred, who could become an easy prey for anyone who wanted their money. At one time, she was also left alone among the greedy nobles who revealed their true colors. Alicia decided to go to stop those impudent people from acting. To begin with, she decided to go to the nearest town, where her guild, Romdak, was located. When the question of money for this trip came up, Alicia remembered her precious earrings. But the girl realized that in her condition, she could not go alone, so she went to talk to the owners of the house. She apologized and asked if they could recommend any mercenaries who were willing to work without a subscription. In response, the couple asked what would happen to her husband, to which the girl was very surprised. Alicia cursed when she saw Norman returning to the house. The young man asked if she was hungry, calling Alicia his love. The girl replied without hesitation that she had just eaten 3 rolls, and only then did she realize how he had addressed her. The boy asked the girl to go to their room. The owners of the house were amused by them, because they were young and in love. Left alone, Norman apologized to the young lady for his inappropriate behavior. Alicia replied that it was even better, because they would get a lot of questions about why they were traveling together. The girl warned the young man that she was a well-known person. So if her friends see this, rumors will spread. So she suggested telling these elderly people the truth, because soon their paths would diverge altogether. Norman replied that they couldn't just part ways. Alicia was surprised to hear the reason for this. The young man asked permission to accompany the girl to her estate. The heroine thought that it wouldn't be so bad if there was a person around to protect her, but she was least worried about her personal safety. The most important thing for her was to regain control of her estate. Time was running out, and Norman could have prevented Alicia from doing what she thought was right. She thought that the return of Diaz's first son would draw a lot of attention to them. The girl was sure that a crowd would gather even to look at his cute face, and she didn't need it at all. But Norman was already worrying the girl, because he was a reminder that the curse described in the book still exists. That's why Alicia decided to tell him that he was making her uncomfortable. At first, Norman did not know what to say, and just looked at him with his angelic gaze. Then he begged them to stop pretending to be a man and a woman and promised to be careful in public. Alicia replied that the young man did not understand her at all. She said that she restored the Melfont estate in 10 years by working as a regular trader. The girl explained that their strength depends on their work and income, but not on their origin. She also added that they chose survival over being aristocrats. The heroine was sure that everyone would welcome Norman with joy, but for her, everything would be different. She believed that his people would perceive Alicia as a Melfont witch, and this would make them hunt her down. Norman looked down and admitted that he understood what she meant. He explained that it took him a while to see how the world had changed over the past 10 years. Alicia was worried that he was offended by her. The guy offered to summarize what the girl had said earlier. He understood that she had to return to the Melfont estate immediately, as there were people hunting for her fortune. But if she goes with him, everyone who cares will pay attention. He added that this could delay her return to Melfont. But from her words, he realized that she was also worried that there would be many rumors about them. Then Norman offered to tell her the benefits she would receive if she did not refuse his escort. The confused girl agreed to listen to him. Diaz's first son said that he is currently the best bodyguard for her because she will not find anyone stronger and more resilient than him. He admitted that he was in his best physical shape 10 years ago when he was imprisoned. He added that for some reason, his body has not changed on the physical level. Alicia saw it as bragging. Norman convinced the girl and said that he was much stronger than any mercenary for money, but he arrogantly pretended to see her consent, and her silence spoke of it. Second, he said he had experience in both direct confrontations and special covert operations. All he needs is a simple hood to hide him in the crowd. He admitted that he had already done this when he bought pastries for them at the local market, but no one even paid attention to him. The girl was thinking, and the young man kept throwing arguments at her. Another was that he would be able to handle any emergencies and get her out of danger quickly. Norman said that he could be an actor in the right situation, like a loving husband. Alicia demanded that he stop, because she understood everything. The girl agreed to believe that he was as handsome and agile as he skillfully told. The young man objected, because in his opinion, these were all facts. Alicia invited him to step into her shoes and listen from the outside to how he perceived everything he said. Norman was worried that he hadn't been convincing enough. The girl said it wasn't, but she stood by her opinion, although she wondered why he was so eager to go with her. The young man replied that he was a paladin of the Lotan Empire and that his duty was to protect the children of the goddess. Alicia replied that if he was mayor's heir, he could just go to the slums. But Diaz's first son did not stop. He said he owed her his life. The heroine replied that anyone could have saved him from that lake, but the guy added that she also saved his soul. Alicia asked in surprise. Norman began to explain and said that his body was indeed imprisoned in the lake, but his soul was sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss, beyond the boundaries of his physical body. Alicia asked again if she had heard the abyss. The young man said that it was his personal desire to accompany her as the savior of not only his body, but also his soul, to the Melfont estate. But he admitted that he dreams of seeing it return to its rightful place. So he begged her once again to give him a chance. Alicia finally agreed to give him this chance. Norman turned to the young lady with joy. But the girl immediately broke the idol and set a condition that they had to draw up a security agreement. The guy was quite surprised by this. She said she agreed with what he had said earlier. But in her opinion, there are still some risks and points that need to be fixed. She called for reinsurance for the sake of both of them. Seeing Norman's confusion, Alicia asked him if he agreed. But the young man started laughing and apologizing because it was all about the words she had said before. The girl was angry and didn't understand what was so funny. Norman tried to explain that a person who understands what the world is made of so well is not so easy to find. The heroine asked if this meant that she should draw up the contract as she wanted. The guy objected and said that they had to do it together to take into account the interests of both sides. At sunset, the young people thanked their host for their hospitality and promised to return the favor if necessary. The elderly people responded by wishing them a safe journey. The contract was drawn up by Party A, Alicia Melfont, and Party B, Norman Diaz. Norman advised the young lady to relax and behave more naturally to avoid attracting attention. The contract stated that Party A was to pay Party B after they arrived at the Melfont estate. The amount will depend on the number of days worked. The young man said that like a real married couple, they should hold each other's hand. Another clause of the contract was that Party A had to comply with Party B's request for disguise whenever it was needed. Suddenly, the girl leaned into Norman and explained that she needed to help him cover his face. The parties to the contract also agreed that Party B should hide his body and face on the street. On their way, they met many suspicious people, which worried the newlyweds. Norman admitted that Alicia was right about the contract, and he was happy that he had agreed to sign it. The contract stipulated that Party B had to protect Party A at the cost of their lives, and this was backed up by the honor of the paladin Mayera. The girl saw Norman's excessive excitement and began to calm him down, because in her opinion, he was just a passerby. The heroine recognized the Tool Market Square on her way to Katam and decided that they were already there. They went to a local jeweler who was looking at the earring in amazement. He asked if they wanted to sell the jewelry. The man said he could offer the maximum price, just 1 gold piece. Alicia lost her temper and shouted that the gemstone in this earring was bought in the Ramdak Guild and polished by the best craftsman in the Imperial City. She asked if he was offering only 1 gold piece for this. The jeweler asked if they were from Ramdak. The girl said that if this was all he could offer, she would accept. At the same time, Alicia threatened that this would be his last deal with them because Ramdak would not supply his goods to him. The man replied that only for her sake would he raise his rate to the market level. The heroine realized that she was able to learn all the tricks of the trade because she herself worked in this field in order to restore the Melfin estate. She was worried about the villagers who could not return to their homes because there were only ruins. People sympathized with her and complained that she had to go through a lot. The girl admitted that she was responsible for the servants and workers who were lucky enough to survive. The heroine recalled how one day she appeared in front of those people and introduced herself on behalf of the Ramdak Guild. Alicia was a helpless girl from a noble family who even rode around the estate in a carriage with guards. She recalled the times when she was humiliated. Customers asked if it was even possible to drink this wine and demanded that she try it first. Wherever she went as a trader, men would laugh and ask her who Ramdak was. They were incredulous, saying that it was a new trade guild that had been created by an aristocrat. But Alicia didn't have time to feel sorry for herself because she didn't want to be hungry, so she had to work and do anything. One day, a maid saw a young lady in a rather strange position on the floor and asked if she was okay. Alicia was sitting on her knees and shouting that she had managed to do it. The frightened worker tried again to find out if she was okay. Alicia said, with a sly look, that they had finally agreed to buy their product. The heroine recalled that she was able to get back on her feet and help her people because she did not pay attention to such concepts as honor and dignity, which she considered to be complete nonsense. The young people received the money, and Norman asked Alicia why she was so pensive if she had anything wrong. She hoped the owner was a real chatterbox. The man asked what else he could do to help young people. Alicia admitted that rumors about her will definitely start circulating, and she dreams that they will play into her hands. She asked me to tell everyone that the head of Ramdak had returned and that she, Alicia Melfont, was on her way to Qatar. When they sat down at the bar, Alicia exhaled and said it had been a long day. Norman was worried that they didn't have enough money to rent a room. The girl offered to find a place to stay for the night on credit, but she was also worried about the guild's reputation. She decided that they needed to make a place to rest outdoors until they arrived in Katam. There, members of her guild will help them. In addition, Alicia believed that money should be spent only on quality service and conditions. Norman suggested that trading cities like Katam attract criminals. He added that a messenger should be sent to the girls' knights to let them know about her arrival. Alicia regretted that there were no knights near the Melfint estate. She said that 10 years ago, on that terrible night, all their knights were executed. But no one else wants to pledge allegiance to their home on that mutilated land. Norman was stunned by the news. The young lady said that everything was fine, and that even without the knights, they were able to flourish again. She added that it was all thanks to Ramdak. The heroine recalled how she asked the shop owner to tell everyone that Ramdak's head had returned and felt a little ashamed of it. Norman asked Alicia how she got into the trading industry. The girl replied that it was all thanks to the lotus flowers. The guy asked again. She said that an epidemic had hit their land and destroyed the entire crop. And when she thought all was lost, she noticed something. They were lotus flowers on the lake. Lotus leaves were used to brew tea. The stems were used as fuel. But Alicia realized that selling tea and fuel was not enough to restore the Melfont estate. And then they came up with the idea of making wine from lotus flowers, which was a much more profitable product. It was supposed to be a unique wine from the Melfont house. The girl proudly announced that they were the first aristocratic family in history to create their own trade guild. She recognized that it was only because of their strict trade policy that they were able to acquire such great wealth. Then they started investing in other areas to generate more income. It was land, jewelry, real estate. They employed soldiers to protect their workers and merchant marines. Alicia painfully admitted that for everyone she was a heartless witch. But she gave up her honor and reputation in order to get her family's fortune back. Now Norman understood why she was so young and already so well versed in the components of this world, and why she was so sensitive to rumors. The young man tried to calm the girl down and said that he believed that making a profit to save many people was much more noble than just honor and dignity. Alicia admitted that she had long since stopped paying attention to her honor and dignity. Other visitors recognized the girl and began whispering whether she was the head of Ramdak, who was killed at the festival. They rejoiced that she had suffered so much back then and were surprised that she was so resilient. The man at the next table claimed that he would always be able to recognize her purple eyes. He blamed their guild, with the help of which they wanted to get to Qatar. The young people continued to sit and listen to the disparaging judgments about Alicia. The voices said that she, as an aristocrat, should have stayed at home and sipped tea, and as if it has no right to prevent them from receiving their profits. Alicia thought with pain that they were right, and she was ready for all kinds of insults. She recognized that she was a strong competitor for other traders, and she was a stranger among the nobility. The heroine called herself an aristocrat who sells wine. The man next to me said that it didn't matter who she was, because the goddess was not kind to her. Another man at the next table said he had heard a story about the Melfant family, and he was sure that many ghosts were hunting them. Alicia was worried about Norman's condition when they heard the men wishing her dead. After all, this sleeping prince simply does not tolerate insults. She tried to calm him down and advised him to ignore any rumors, as she was used to them. Norman replied that this was not true. The heroine began to scream, addressing her companion, who was in a strange state. He hysterically shouted that it was not like that at all, not even a little bit. A commotion and a fight broke out in the bar. The girl looked at all this calmly and thought that they were like dogs. They could only bark without resistance. But she also worried that a fight in a tavern could turn into a problem for them. Alicia begged Norman to stop, afraid that he might kill the impudent stranger. She tried to convince her companion that everything was really fine. Norman did not give up and continued to argue that this was not the case. He clarified that the girl was not doing well. Alicia persuaded the young man to leave, but he continued to beat the man and said that he would teach him to be responsible for his words. The heroine asked Norman not to complicate the situation and called him a stupid fool. Soon they saw the friends of the man Norman was beating start to threaten them for his rude behavior. Alicia nervously shouted to the young man that they had to leave, otherwise she would leave him here alone. The men started shouting that the newlyweds were leaving and urged them to run after them. Norman ran after the young lady and warned her that she was having trouble breathing. He asked her if she was sure she was okay. Alicia was mentally angry with the young man. She didn't understand why he was so worried about her for no reason, as it was a violation of their contract. She decided to deduct his salary for these outrages, and this, in her opinion, will be even less than the damage he has done. The sleeping prince continued to persuade the young lady to walk more slowly, because she might get sick. Alicia seriously shouted that she was tired of his constant fussing. She asked if Norman didn't like something and wanted to hit her. The frightened young man assured me that this was not true and that there was no need for it. She reminded him that the first son of the Diaz family does not tolerate insults, so she doesn't understand what's stopping him from hitting her now? Norman began to apologize for his behavior in the tavern. He added that it is the job of every paladin to punish those who allow ignorance towards others. Alicia shouted that it made no sense. She said that these fools were right. The heroine clarified that this is true because she, Alicia Melfant, is a disgrace to the aristocracy. She traded her dignity for money. Norman replied that he could not agree with the horrible things they were saying. He also does not believe what the curse said in his ear. Alicia was surprisingly silent and did not dare to ask him questions. Norman admitted that in that lake he constantly heard voices demanding his death. In the tavern, he tried to ignore those people, but it didn't work. He recalled the words he had heard there once again. The men believed that Alicia was supposed to die that day with her family. He had already gone through constant insults that did not stop for a moment. He also had a death wish at one time. He began to get used to the idea that he was going to die, but soon it was not the strange voices, but Norman himself who tried to kill himself, his own self. Norman admitted that Alicia is a very nice person, unlike him, but at the same time, he believed that it didn't matter how strong she was. After all, the wounds from other people's hurtful words do not go away on their own. He begged Alicia not to let him treat her like that. The girl said yes. She promised not to humiliate herself, but instead asked that Norman keep his temper in check. The young man replied with satisfaction that he promised not to behave like that again. Later, Alicia suggested that they should go to Katam through the forest so that the bandits wouldn't find them. But she was not happy that they would have to sleep on the street again. Norman noted that the sky is quite starry tonight. Throwing his cloak over the girl's shoulders, he assured her that she would be able to admire the beautiful sky in complete safety today. Morning came, but Norman continued to sleep soundly. The heroine crept up on him very quietly. He asked why she was looking at him like that. Alicia noted that he was too vigilant. Norman replied that a guard should always be ready to meet the enemy. The girl asked if she had heard correctly about the readiness for an attack. She laughed and said that the young man slept so soundly that he even snored. Seeing Norman's confusion, she reassured him that it was a joke. The young man noted that the young lady was much more prepared for the long journey than he was. Alicia said Norman flattered her, but she had some news. She happily informed them that they would no longer wear out the soles of their shoes. Hiding in the bushes, the young people saw an unfamiliar crew. Norman noticed that there was a Romdak flag hanging there. He said it was a pleasant surprise that they had run into members of her trade guild. The young man thought it was help from heaven. Alicia replied that the heavens do not help anyone, at least not to her. She surprised the young man by saying that she would have refused help anyway. The heroine believed that only she could save herself. She stepped onto the road in front of the carriage and began shouting for Stan to stop the carriage. Alicia shouted that she was sure she could hear her. The coachman warned the girl that she was standing in the way of a woman named Stan, who is the head of the Romdak Guild. A woman in the middle of the carriage gave the order to stop. Alicia and Norman continued to stand silently in place. A woman named Stan, the acting head of the Romdak Guild, appeared before them. Stan started to run. She threw herself into Alicia's arms. The disturbed woman began to cry and said she was very worried because she thought they had lost a young lady. She asked Alicia if she had been watching her diet, since she had lost so much weight. Alicia mentally recalled the abundance of bakery products. Norman was happy to think that this elderly woman looked kind. Stan asked in surprise what that glow was next to them. She was referring to a very nice and handsome guy who was with Alicia. The woman was whispering in the young lady's ear to dump that idiot Philip Morfak and get in touch with this guy. The girl was furious, but she corrected Philip's surname because he was a Morfolk. Alicia thought that she no longer needed a bodyguard because now she was under the supervision of Stan and the knights. The woman continued to admire Norman, and the heroine was worried that traveling with him might complicate things for them. She dared to tell the sleeping prince that they had everything ready for him to return to his family as soon as possible. He looked puzzled and politely asked again. Alicia confidently informed me that it was time to terminate the contract. Silence fell between the people in the carriage. Norman decided that he couldn't just give up. Alicia didn't want to be fooled by his angelic eyes. The heroine said that she would pay him according to the terms of the contract, but deduct one day for the fight in the tavern. She gives him a horse and carriage for free. She asked them to separate where the road would be divided. It was hard for her to voice it, and she regretted that she could not just ignore him. Norman said he was very scared. He explained that the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years, and he has become a stranger here. He wondered if he could find his way home on his own. Stan began to complain and feel sorry for the boy. She said she was very sorry. The woman told him not to be afraid because he could always go with them. Alicia begged Stan to stop. Norman asked the young lady if it was possible. Alicia was angry that she couldn't refuse him right away, so as not to look heartless in their eyes. She agreed on the condition that he would not go with them to the Melfon estate. The young man nodded affirmatively. The girl said that they would definitely have to part ways in Qatar. The knight told Alicia's secretary Erica that they had found her and that she was now in a hotel with Madame Stan. The girl clarified that it was not they who found her, but she who found them in the style of Her Highness. The knight suggested that they might need to ride out to meet her to deliver the young lady safely. The girl's secretary said that Mrs. Sten would be the best person to handle it. In addition, Alicia herself knows Katam very well. A voice asked where Alicia was now. Erica shouted that she had ordered no one to come in. He was a young man named Gano, and he was a representative of the trade guild. He said that he asked to be informed as soon as the young lady was found. The girl replied that she shouldn't have done it. She also said that he should treat her with respect, because she was his boss, not his friend. Gano said that Alicia should determine this, not her. He said he had to check on his boss's health after her workers whispered behind closed doors. He added that only she could free him from that slave contract. Erica lost her temper and started shouting that he meant a legal labor contract, not a slave contract. Gano warned the secretary that he had not come here to argue with her. Then Erica ordered him to get out of there. She reminded us that Lady Alicia is the head of the Romdak Guild, and she will be back, accompanied by her loyal staff. Gano said that he would be the one to bring her back here. Knight told Erica that this could be a real problem for them. The girl asked him what he was waiting for. She told him to warn them as soon as possible before the monkey got to the city. The story shifts to Qatar, to Alicia's apartment. Alicia was lying in a soft bed and rejoicing like a child. The heroine noted that this apartment is very different from her home, but a dry bed and a roof over her head are still better than sleeping on the street. She recalled Mr. Norman, who took great care of her safety and comfort during this trip. But then she mentally scolded herself for beating herself up, because he was just doing his job and would be paid for it. The heroine was worried about how she would tell him that he should be leaving by now, as they were in Qatar. Alicia thought back to the contract and decided that she needed to add a clause with a clear date. She got dressed, went to the room in the apartment and knocked on it. The young lady persuaded herself that she was doing the right thing and that she needed to finish the job. A surprised Norman opened the door. The young people looked at each other and no one dared to speak first. Madame Stan suggested that Norman put on the shirt to make sure he would look gorgeous in it. She promised that they would go around every boutique in Qatar looking for such things. Alicia asked unhappily what was going on here. The woman replied that she was just in time. Stan praised the young man and said he looked like an angel. She believed that everything on him would look luxurious. The sleeping prince addressed the young lady and seemed to ask for help. Alicia warned Stan that his appearance could be deceiving, as he had once been a paladin commander. She said that he could not be used as a mannequin. At the time, Norman wondered what was so suspicious about him. The woman shouted that his appearance could open all doors for him, but instead, he spent 10 years in exile. She assumed that he had the right to receive all that he had not received during those years outside of civilization. Alicia decided that Mrs. Stan had a lot of free time. The woman replied that now they all breathed a little, because the young lady had returned. The heroine set herself up to be the boss who has to show everyone who is in charge. She said she needed to discuss the details of the contract on behalf of the guild with Mr. Norman. She added that she did not want to be disturbed. The girl hinted that this applies even to Stan. The woman humbly agreed and asked to be called if she was needed. When they were alone, Norman noted that the young lady was doing a great job. Alicia replied that it was all true. She reminded them that they had to discuss the details of the contract. Norman looked puzzled and just kept quiet. The heroine said that, according to their contract, the young man was to be provided with transportation, some cash, and food. She added that with all this, he would be able to get to the family estate. The girl said that it was to be shipped in a week, and she added this clause to the contract. Alicia asked if he wanted to see the changes. Norman continued to be silent, and the girl called out to him. He was looking out the window and noticed that people were having fun on the street. The girl looked curiously out the window with him. Together they noted that even at such a time there were many people on the streets. Alicia clarified that they were celebrating the founding of the empire, but tonight they would be partying all night. Norman said with regret that the people outside looked so happy. The heroine suggested that he should be aware of this annual festival, or he is reacquainting himself with the world after a long absence. She offered to have their guards show him around if he was interested. Norman happily clarified, but the heroine warned him that he had to hide his face. She said that his family had already received a message that he was alive, but she had to deliver him unharmed. The guy swore he would be very careful. He dared to ask if Alicia would go with him. The girl delicately replied that she had a lot of work to do. Norman replied that in that case he would have to remind her of the terms of the contract. When Alicia came out to the square, she thought he had struck her below the belt, and she had no choice but to agree to go out with him. The young man said that even with these latest amendments, the contract still has a week to go. He added that he should always be with the girl as her bodyguard, according to the document. Norman admitted that he could not move without the young lady. Alicia was nervous, because in her mind he had obliged her to go with him. The guy took out a beautiful piece of jewelry and said that the purple color suited the heroine so well. The young people stood in the middle of the square, not hiding from anyone. They were followed by a man who looked at them with a dark, angry gaze. He addressed his master and said that he had come here for this sinful soul. He hopes to see his will fulfilled. He also begged that the god Arfo be allowed to escort her soul to hell. Alicia clung to Norman and was nervous. The young man was also frightened by the number of people on the street at night. Norman suggested that the lady take his hand. She said she didn't like being touched. A man with scary eyes was approaching the young people. He ordered Alicia Melfant to follow him. He added that he would call her to the depths of hell. Suddenly, Gano snuck up on him and told him not to move. Otherwise, he would wring his neck. At this time, Alicia and Norman were walking calmly around the square. Gano tied up the stranger and wondered who the hell he was. He looked nervous, because it was because of this old man that he was unable to keep up with the young people. The stranger raised his head and looked into Gano's eyes. The guy was very surprised by what he saw and cursed. Before that, he met Ophelia on the square and asked her what she was doing here. She ordered Gano to do as she said if he wanted Alicia to return safely to the estate.